The Council's mistake, the massive observation deck of Nexus Station, stretched across 3 kilometers of reinforced quantum glass, offering an unobstructed view of the galactic core. Thousands of stars burned in the distance, their light painting the chamber in shades of gold and silver. This was the heart of the galactic dominion, where decisions affecting trillions of lives were made with the casual indifference of gods. Admiral Korvash stood alone at the edge of the deck, his scaled hands clasped behind his back. The warrior cut an imposing figure even among the diverse species that populated the station. 7 feet tall, with midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light. He bore the scars of countless battles across his face and arms. Most prominent was the jagged line that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a reminder of humanity's first contact with his people 50 years ago. The chamber doors hissed open behind him, and the familiar sound of approaching footsteps echoed across the polished floor. Korvash didn't need to turn to know who it was. The electromagnetic signature was unmistakable. "Your early, Supreme Chancellor," Korvash said, his voice carrying the gravelly undertone common to his species. Supreme. Chancellor Seraphim materialized beside him, the energy being's form shifting between solid and ethereal states. When addressing the Council, Seraphim typically maintained a more humanoid appearance, but in private he allowed his true nature to show. Crackling arcs of purple and blue energy danced across his translucent frame. "The preliminary votes have been cast," Seraphim announced without preamble. "The motion to revoke humanity's neutral status has gained significant support. We'll have the final vote in 2 hours." Korvash finally turned, his amber eyes meeting the swirling vortex that served as Seraphim's face. "And you're telling me this because you're the only member of this council who has actually fought humans in open warfare. Your opinion carries weight, especially among the military factions." A bitter laugh escaped Korvash's throat. My opinion is that we're about to commit the greatest strategic blunder in Dominion history." Seraphim's energy pattern flickered with what might have been surprise. The humans have maintained their isolation for 5 decades. They've shown no interest in galactic politics, no desire for expansion beyond their immediate stellar neighborhood. They're a minor power at best. Minor power. Korvash's voice rose, causing several passing diplomats to glance nervously in their direction. "Chancellor, with respect, you have no idea what you're talking about." The energy being's form solidified, slightly, a sign of growing attention. "Enlighten me." Korvash was quiet for a long moment, his gaze returning to the stars. "Have you ever wondered why the Vexter Empire, which had conquered 47 star systems and enslaved a dozen species, suddenly stopped expanding exactly 50 years ago? The official records state that your people chose to focus on internal development and joined the Dominion voluntarily. The official records are a lie." Korvash's claws extended slightly, betraying his emotional state. "We didn't choose anything. We were given a choice, and that choice was made very clear to us." Before Seraphim could respond, the council chamber's alarm chimed softly. It was time for the session to begin. The council chamber itself was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy. Arranged in concentric circles, it could accommodate representatives from over 300 species, each with their own atmospheric and gravitational requirements. Force fields and environmental controls ensured that methane breathing Zephyrians could sit beside aquatic hydrants, while energy beings like Seraphim could interact with solid matter species. As the delegates filed in, Korvash noted the familiar faces. There was Ambassador Thylix of the Crystalline Resonance Collective, her body chiming softly with each step. Commander Gorthak of the insectoid hive clans clicked his mandibles in what passed for a greeting. Even the enigmatic Voidwalkers had sent a representative, though their shadowy form made it impossible to determine much about their current disposition. Supreme Chancellor Seraphim took his position at the center of the chamber, his form now maintaining a steady humanoid shape for the benefit of the assembly. Distinguished delegates, we gather today to address Resolution 4419, the reclassification of human neutral status. A holographic display activated above the chamber, showing a three-dimensional map of local galactic space. The human sphere of influence appeared as a modest cluster of blue dots centered around their home system of Sol. Compared to the vast red territories of the Dominion and the green expanses of the hegemony, it seemed almost insignificant. Ambassador Felix was the first to speak, her crystalline voice resonating throughout the chamber. The Resonance Collective supports this resolution. For 50 years, humanity has remained isolated, while the rest of the galaxy has moved toward cooperation and shared prosperity. It's time they took their place in the galactic community, willingly or otherwise. Commander Gorthak's mandibles clicked in agreement. The hive clans concur. Neutrality is a luxury that smaller civilizations cannot afford indefinitely. The humans possess valuable resources and technology that could benefit all member species. Similar sentiments echoed throughout the chamber. The prevailing opinion was clear. Humanity had hidden behind their neutral status for too long. It was time to bring them into the fold, by force if necessary. Finally, Seraphim's attention turned to Corvash. Admiral, you've been notably silent. As our most experienced military strategist and the only council member with direct combat experience against human forces, your perspective would be valuable. Corvash rose slowly from his seat, the weight of history heavy on his shoulders. 50 years ago, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. I was a young commander in the Vexstar Imperial Navy, fresh from victories against the Centauri Federation and the Rigel Concordat. We believed ourselves invincible. When our expansion encountered human territory, we expected another quick conquest. He paused, studying the faces of the delegates. Most showed polite attention, but he could see skepticism in their eyes. They'd heard war stories before. The humans sent us a single message when we crossed into their space. No threats, no demands, just a simple request. Please leave. We wish you no harm, but we will defend ourselves if necessary. A few chuckles arose from the assembly. The idea of mighty humans politely asking invaders to leave struck many as amusing. We ignored their request, naturally. A species that had to ask invaders to leave was clearly weak. We proceeded with our standard protocol: orbital bombardment of military installations, followed by ground invasion to secure the population centers. Corvash's expression darkened. That was our first mistake. The chamber fell silent as delegates sensed the shift in the Admiral's tone. Our first target was a mining colony called New Geneva. Population roughly 2 million. Our battle fleet consisted of 4 dreadnoughts, 12 destroyers, and an assault carrier with 50,000 troops. By any reasonable calculation, it should have been over in hours. Corvash activated his personal holographic display, showing sensor recordings from the battle. The image quality was poor, degraded by time and electromagnetic interference, but the basic details were clear. We emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system and immediately began our approach. The human defenders consisted of 6 ships. that our sensors could barely classify as warships. They looked more like cargo vessels than military craft. We assumed they were civilian ships pressed into emergency service. The recorded battle began playing. The Vexstar fleet, sleek and predatory, advanced in perfect formation toward the cluster of human ships. The human vessels appeared to be retreating, falling back toward their planet. Our admiral at the time was Corvash, the Elder, my namesake and mentor. He ordered the fleet to pursue and destroy the retreating humans before beginning orbital bombardment. Standard tactics that had worked against every species we'd encountered. The recording showed the two fleets closing distance. Then, without warning, the human ships stopped retreating and turned to face their pursuers. This is where things became ... interesting. Corvash's voice carried a note that made several delegates lean forward. The humans opened fire first, but not with conventional weapons. Instead, they used something our computers couldn't identify. On the display, beams of coherent energy lanced out from the human ships, but these weren't standard lasers or plasma cannons. The beams seemed to bend space itself, creating visible distortions as they traveled. The first beam struck our flagship's shields and simply turned them off. Not overwhelmed them, not burned through them. Turned them off, as if someone had found the power switch. The second beam hit our hull directly. The recording showed the massive Vexstar dreadnought shuddering as the strange weapon struck. But instead of explosion or hull breach, the ship simply began to fall apart. Its molecular bonds apparently dissolving. A collective gasp arose from several delegates. Ambassador Thilix's crystalline form rang like a bell as she vibrated with shock. In 30 seconds, Corvash continued, the humans had destroyed our flagship and severely damaged 2 other vessels. But that wasn't the end of it. As we scrambled to regroup, they did something that still gives me nightmares. He manipulated the display, zooming in on the human fleet. They sent us a message. Not through communications arrays or diplomatic channels. They broadcast it directly into our minds. Every Vexstar on every ship heard the same voice, speaking. Perfect Vexstar. As if they'd been studying our language and culture for decades. The chamber was now completely silent. Even the ambient hum of the station's systems seemed muted. The voice was calm, professional, almost apologetic. It said, "We warned you to leave. We do not wish to continue this violence. Withdraw now, and no further harm will come to you. Proceed with your attack, and we will demonstrate why we choose to remain isolated." Corvash closed the display and faced the assembly directly. Admiral Corvash the Elder had survived 43 major battles. He had never retreated, never shown fear in the face of any enemy. But he looked at those readings, at the technology that could dissolve molecular bonds and communicate directly with alien minds, and he made the wisest decision of his career. He ordered the fleet to withdraw. Commander Gorthek's mandibles clicked skeptically. "Surely you're exaggerating, Admiral. No species possesses technology that advanced, I thought." "So too," Corvash replied, "which is why, against direct orders, I took a stealth frigate back to the system 3 days later. I had to see for myself what kind of defenses they'd actually prepared." He reactivated his display, showing new sensor readings. What I found changed everything I thought I knew about warfare, about technology, and about humanity. The display showed the new Geneva system, but it looked completely different from the earlier recordings. Where before there had been a simple mining colony and a few defensive installations, now there were structures that defied easy categorization. In 3 days, they had constructed what appeared to be a complete orbital fortress network. Hundreds of platforms, each one utilizing technologies that our best scientists couldn't begin to understand. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. Korvash highlighted specific sensor readings. According to our scans, these installations had been there for months, not days, months. Our initial approach had somehow missed defensive structures that were hiding in plain sight. The implications sent a chill through the chamber. Several delegates began whispering urgently among themselves. But they let us detect them after the first battle, Korvash continued. They wanted us to see what we were truly facing, and when I tried to get closer readings, they sent me another message. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They knew my name, my personal history, my family lineage, my tactical preferences. The voice said, Admiral Korvash, son of Korvash, student of military theory and practitioner of honorable warfare. You seek knowledge, very well. Observe, learn, and carry this knowledge back to your people. The holographic display suddenly exploded with activity. The human defensive platforms began demonstrating their capabilities in what was clearly a choreographed display. Gravity manipulators that could crush asteroids into neutronium. Energy projectors that could ignite gas. Giants. Temporal distortion fields that could slow down incoming attacks to a crawl. They showed me weapons that could sterilize planets without damaging the ecosystem. Shields that existed in parallel dimensions. Ships that could phase through solid matter, and through it all, that same calm voice explaining each system as if they were giving a lecture to a military academy. Korvash deactivated the display and stood in silence for a moment. When the demonstration ended, they asked me a question. Do you understand now why we choose neutrality? We have the power to reshape the galaxy according to our will. We choose not to use it. But if forced to defend ourselves, we will do so with absolute efficiency. The chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Ambassador Thylix spoke, her voice no longer carrying its earlier confidence. You're suggesting that humanity has been restraining itself. I'm not suggesting anything, Korvash replied. I'm telling you what I witnessed. Humanity doesn't remain neutral because they're weak or disinterested in galactic politics. They remain neutral because they're the most powerful species in the galaxy, and they're wise enough to know that power corrupts. Supreme Chancellor Seraphim's energy pattern flickered rapidly. If this is true, why haven't they shared these technologies? Why haven't they taken leadership roles in galactic civilization? Because, Korvash said, they learned something that the rest of us haven't, that the greatest victory is the battle you never have to fight. They've achieved a level of technological advancement that makes conflict obsolete. And they're waiting for the rest of us to catch up morally and ethically. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as possible. 50 years ago, they gave the Vexter Empire a choice: leave them alone or be destroyed. We chose wisely and joined the Dominion as reformed conquerors. Today, you're about to make the same mistake we almost made. The difference is, I don't think they'll be as patient this time. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's communication system activated with an urgent priority signal. A technician's voice filled the air. Supreme Chancellor, we're receiving an unscheduled transmission from the Sol system. They're requesting permission to address the Council directly. Every delegate turned to stare at Seraphim, whose energy form had gone completely rigid. In 50 years of human neutrality, they had never once requested to address the Galactic Council. Put them through, Seraphim ordered, his voice barely steady. The main holographic display activated, showing a simply furnished room with clean white walls. Behind a modest desk sat a human female, middle-aged by their species standards, wearing what appeared to be a plain, dark blue uniform with no visible rank insignia. "Greetings, esteemed members of the Galactic Council," she said, her voice carrying the same calm professionalism that Corvash remembered from 50 years ago. "I am Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of External Affairs for the Terran Confederation. We understand that you are currently debating our neutral status. We felt it appropriate to address your concerns directly." She paused, and though her expression remained pleasant, there was something in her eyes that made Corvash's scales instinctively bristle with danger recognition. "Before you proceed with your vote, we thought you might be interested to know that we've been monitoring this session. We're aware of Admiral Corvash's testimony, and we're grateful for his wisdom and honesty. However, we feel obligated to correct one misunderstanding." Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly, her hands folded calmly on the desk. "The Admiral is correct that we demonstrated certain defensive capabilities to discourage Vextar aggression 50 years ago. However, those systems represent technology that we developed nearly a century ago. What he witnessed was not our current defensive capability, but rather a historical preservation project designed to maintain obsolete military hardware." The blood drained from Corvash's face as the implications hit him. The weapons that had seemed impossibly advanced 50 years ago were considered obsolete by human standards. "We're sharing this information," Dr. Chen continued, "because we want you to understand the choice you're making. We have remained neutral not out of weakness or disinterest, but out of respect for your sovereignty and our desire to allow galactic civilization to develop naturally. We believe that forced evolution, whether technological or social, ultimately leads to instability." She stood and moved to a large window behind her desk, showing a view of Earth from orbit. But what caught the delegates' attention were the structures visible in space around the planet. Vast geometric forms that seemed to bend light around them, installations that appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "However, if you choose to end our neutral status and force us into galactic politics, we want you to understand the full scope of that decision. We are not the same species that your ancestors first encountered. We have spent the last 5 centuries preparing for every possible future, including the one where isolation is no longer an option." The camera view shifted, showing what appeared to be a star map, but with additional dimensions that hurt to look at directly. "We have seeded the galaxy with monitoring stations, established research outposts in parallel realities, and developed technologies that exist beyond your current understanding of physics. We have done all of this in preparation for the day when we might be forced to take an active role in galactic affairs." Dr. Chen returned to her desk, her expression still calm but somehow more intense. "So we ask you one final time, are you certain you want to end our neutrality? Are you prepared for humanity to become an active participant in galactic civilization? Because once that door is opened, it cannot be closed again." The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in absolute silence. Supreme Chancellor Seraphim was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "All those in favor of maintaining humanity's neutral status." Every hand, claw, tentacle, and energy appendage in the chamber rose in unanimous agreement. The price of arrogance. The emergency session had been called for dawn cycle, but Admiral Corvash found himself unable to sleep. He stood once again at the observation deck of Nexus Station, watching the distant stars with the weight of terrible knowledge pressing down on him. The Council's unanimous vote to maintain human neutrality should have brought relief, but something felt wrong. Admiral, the voice behind him, belonged to Commander Zethus, his aide and intelligence officer. The young Vextar's scales held a nervous shimmer that betrayed his anxiety. We've received disturbing reports from the border sectors. Corvash turned, noting the datapad clutched tightly in Zethus's claws. What kind of reports? 3 separate incidents in the last 6 hours. The hegemony has launched unprovoked attacks on human research stations in the Centauri cluster. They're claiming that yesterday's council session was compromised, that the human transmission somehow influenced the vote through technological means. The older admiral felt his blood turn cold. The hegemony was the Dominion's primary rival, a collection of militaristic species that had always viewed humanity's neutrality with suspicion. If they were moving against human interests while hiding behind claims of technological manipulation, what's the response from Supreme Chancellor Seraphim? That's just it, sir. The Chancellor has been unreachable since the session ended. His personal guard claims he's in deep meditation, but... Zethus hesitated. But, sir, energy beings don't meditate. They commune directly with their power sources. When they go silent like this, it usually means they're either severely damaged, or... The young officer's voice trailed off. Or they're afraid, Corvash finished grimly. Show me the incident reports. The datapad displayed 3 separate military actions, each following the same pattern. Hegemony strike forces had emerged from hyperspace near human research installations, demanded immediate surrender, and when the humans requested clarification, had opened fire without warning. All 3 attacks had been complete successes from a tactical standpoint. The human facilities had been destroyed, their personnel killed or captured, and the hegemony forces had withdrawn without casualties. But something about the reports troubled Corvash. In his experience, humans didn't simply die quietly when attacked. Even 50 years ago, they had shown a tendency to make their enemies pay for every victory. Zethus, pull up the sensor logs from these attacks. Full spectrum analysis. As the data compiled, Corvash's unease grew. The hegemony reports showed textbook military victories against targets that offered minimal resistance. But the quantum signatures were wrong. The electromagnetic patterns didn't match what he remembered from human technology, and the debris fields seemed staged. Sir, Zethus noticed his commander's troubled expression. These attacks never happened, Corvash said quietly. Or rather, they happened, but not the way the hegemony thinks they did. Before Zethus could ask for clarification, the station's alert klaxons began blaring. Emergency lights bathed the observation deck in pulsing red as the automated announcement system activated. All personnel to battle stations. Unknown fleet detected approaching Nexus Station. Classification unknown. Intent unknown. ETA 18 minutes. Corvash was already moving toward the command center when his personal communicator activated. The voice that emerged was one he recognized immediately. Admiral Corvash, son of Corvash, student of military theory and practitioner of honorable warfare. Dr. Sarah Chen's calm tone carried easily over the station's alarms. We need to talk. The command center of Nexus Station was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with control stations designed for dozens of different species working in harmony. Today, that harmony was shattered as officers from every member species frantically tried to make sense of their sensor readings. Admiral on deck. Someone shouted as Corvash entered, but he waved off the formal acknowledgement. Report, he ordered, moving to the central holographic display. Sir, We've got multiple contacts approaching. From the direction of Sol System, reported Commander Visis, the station's crystalline tactical officer. 17 vessels, conflagration unknown, technology profile unlike anything in our databases. The holographic display showed the approaching fleet, but the ships defied easy categorization. They seemed to exist in a state of constant flux, their shapes shifting and flowing like liquid metal while maintaining perfect formation. Worse, their energy signatures were off the scale. How long until they reach us? Korvash asked. At current approach speed, 14 minutes. But sir, that's assuming they maintain current velocity. These ships appear to be capable of instantaneous position changes. Instantaneous, Korvash began, then stopped as understanding dawned. They're not traveling through normal space. They're folding reality around themselves. The communications officer, a multi-tentacled Hydrax, looked up from his station, with confusion evident in his bioluminescent patterns. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission request. The source appears to be ... everywhere. Put it through. Dr. Chen's image appeared on the main display, but this time she wasn't sitting behind a desk. She stood on what appeared to be the bridge of one of the approaching vessels, and behind her, Korvash could see beings that were clearly human but somehow ... more. Their movements were too precise. Their eyes held depths that suggested enhanced cognition, and they worked with technology that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. Admiral Korvash, Dr. Chun said, I apologize for the dramatic approach, but recent events have forced our hand. The hegemony's attacks on our installations were not as successful as they believe. Those attacks were simulations, Korvash realized. Correct. We've been monitoring hegemony military communications for some time. When their leadership decided to test our defenses while using the council vote as political cover, we felt it appropriate to let them discover the difference between our public face and our actual capabilities. The tactical display suddenly shifted, showing not just the human fleet approaching Nexus Station, but dozens of other contacts throughout the galaxy. Human ships were appearing in every major system, each one broadcasting the same message, by order of the Terran Confederation. High Command, all hostile actions against human personnel and installations will cease immediately. Any species, government, or organization that has participated in unprovoked aggression against human interests has 36 hours to surrender responsible parties for trial. Failure to comply will result in direct intervention. Commander crystalline form was chiming with alarm frequencies. Admiral sensors are detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout hegemony space. It's as if something is ... restructuring their star systems. Dr. Chen nodded calmly. The hegemony leadership believed that humanity's neutrality was a sign of weakness. They attempted to capture our research stations to steal our technology. And when that failed, they planned to invade the Sol System itself. We've decided to correct their misconceptions. The display shifted again, this time showing the hegemony's capital system of Drakmor. What they saw defied comprehension. The system's 3 planets had been moved from their original orbits and now hung in perfect geometric alignment around their star. Massive structures, clearly of human origin, surrounded each world like metallic flowers. What have you done? Korvash whispered. We've established administrative oversight of hegemony territory, Dr. Chen replied matter-of-factly. Their military forces have been confined to their homeworlds while we conduct a review of their actions. Species with a history of unprovoked aggression require careful monitoring before they can be trusted with galactic citizenship. You've conquered an entire interstellar empire in a matter of hours. Conquered is not the correct term, Admiral. We've implemented protective custody. The hegemony species will be given the opportunity to reform their governmental structures and cultural practices. Those who embrace cooperation and peaceful coexistence will be granted autonomy within their traditional territories. Those who insist on maintaining aggressive postures will be relocated to specially prepared worlds where they can pursue their warrior cultures without threatening innocent civilizations. The implications were staggering. In less than 6 hours, humanity had not only defended against a coordinated attack by one of the galaxy's major powers, but had completely restructured their society. Dr. Chen Korvash said carefully, "What does this mean for the rest of the galaxy?" Her expression softened slightly. "That depends entirely on what the rest of the galaxy chooses to do, Admiral. For 50 years, we've maintained our neutrality because we believed that forced evolution creates resentment and instability. We still believe that. But we will no longer allow aggressive species to threaten peaceful ones simply because we're unwilling to intervene." She turned to address someone off-screen, then looked back at Korvash. "We're implementing what we call the Shepherd Protocol. Humanity will take active responsibility for maintaining peace and stability throughout the galaxy. Species that embrace cooperation and peaceful development will find us valuable allies and trading partners. Species that insist on conquest and oppression will discover why we chose isolation for so long." The human fleet had now reached visual range of Nexus Station, and what Korvash saw made his scales ripple with involuntary fear responses. The ships weren't just advanced, they existed partially outside normal space-time, their hulls incorporating technologies that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics. "There will be a transition period," Dr. Chen continued. "Existing governmental structures that have proven themselves capable of peaceful coexistence will be allowed to continue with minimal oversight. The Dominion, for example, has shown admirable progress toward cooperative civilization. Your council will retain its autonomy, with human observers available to provide guidance when requested. And if we don't request guidance?" "Commander, this is asked," her chimes now carrying notes of barely controlled panic. Dr. Chun's smile was patient, almost maternal. "Commander, in the last 6 hours, we've restructured 17 star systems, established monitoring stations in 43 different realities, and created a comprehensive database of every sentient being in the galaxy. We've also eliminated hunger, disease, and poverty from 14 member species and begun terraforming projects on 67 previously uninhabitable worlds. We're not here to rule you. We're here to help you become everything you're capable of being." She paused, letting the magnitude of humanity's capabilities sink in. "The choice, as always, is yours. You can continue governing yourselves as you see fit, with the knowledge that we're here to prevent large-scale conflicts and protect innocent populations. Or you can request direct assistance with various challenges your species face. We have solutions to problems you haven't even discovered yet." Admiral Korvash found his voice. "Dr. Chen, forgive me, but this is a fundamental change in galactic civilization. How do we know that humanity won't become the very thing you're protecting us from? How do we know you won't decide that our self-governance is inefficient and take direct control?" For the first time, Dr. Chen's expression became truly serious. "Admiral, that's an excellent question, and it deserves an honest answer. The truth is, you don't know. You have only our word and our actions to judge us by. But consider this. If we wanted to rule the galaxy, we would have done so centuries ago. If we wanted to eliminate competition, there would be no other intelligent species left to have this conversation. She gestured to the bridge around her, where humans and what appeared to be other species worked together in obvious harmony. What we want is to see every species in the galaxy reach their full potential. We've learned that diversity of thought and approach leads to solutions that no single species could discover alone. We need you to be yourselves, to grow and develop, and contribute your unique perspectives to the greater galactic community. But under human oversight, Corvash pressed. Under human protection, she corrected. There's a difference, though I understand why it might not be immediately apparent from your perspective. The communication suddenly expanded, and Corvash realized that Dr. Chen was now broadcasting to every inhabited world in the galaxy simultaneously. Her image appeared on countless screens in hundreds of languages, translated in real time for species that didn't use visual communication at all. Citizens of the galaxy, she began, 50 years ago, humanity made a choice to remain neutral in galactic affairs. We did this not out of disinterest, but out of respect for your independence and our desire to see you develop naturally. Today, that neutrality ends, not by our choice, but because aggressive forces have made it clear that peaceful coexistence is impossible without active intervention. Images began appearing alongside her words. The hegemony attacks on human research stations, but also dozens of other conflicts throughout the galaxy. Wars that had been dismissed as local disputes were revealed to be part of a coordinated campaign by militaristic species to test humanity's resolve. We have now assumed responsibility for maintaining galactic peace and stability. This is not conquest. This is stewardship. Every species will retain their autonomy, their cultures, their right to self-determination. What will end is your right to wage unprovoked wars against your neighbors, to enslave other species, or to commit genocide in the name of expansion. The broadcast showed images of human ships arriving at conflict zones throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors but as peacekeepers. In system after system, battles that had raged for decades simply stopped as both sides found themselves unable to continue fighting. To those species who have embraced peace and cooperation, nothing changes except that you will find new opportunities for growth and exploration as resources previously wasted on warfare are redirected toward constructive purposes. To those who have built their civilizations on conquest and oppression, everything changes. You will be given the opportunity to reform your societies and join the galactic community as peaceful members. Those who refuse will find themselves isolated until such time as they choose to evolve beyond